Good evening. I'd like to call to order this special town council meeting for Wednesday, April 27th, 2016. The 2016-2017 budget workshops continue. We're going to start by rising for a moment of silence. Of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein?
Here.
Laffin?
Here.
Letourneau?
Here.
Marone?
Here.
Shortell?
Present.
Sullivan?
Here.
Testa? Zandri? And Chairman Cervoni.
Here.
Democrats are never here. Take a lesson from the independents.
Councilor Zandri has advised me that he is dealing with traffic on his way here. Councilor Testa has a conflict. With that, I'm going to skip ahead to the addendum, which is discussion and possible action regarding a letter of intent concerning the Lend-Lease project. Attorney Small is here to answer our questions.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the mayor to execute the letter of intent with Lend-Lease in substantially the form as presented, subject to edits by the law department if needed.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions for Attorney Small? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Janice.
Good evening.
Looking at the option fee on page 4, it indicates that there's going to be semi-annual payments,
Yes.
and it says as set forth below, and there's no below.
That really should be corrected. It below actually says it's subject to negotiation at this time. The proposed amount of the option payments are currently being reviewed to ensure the rates are in line with normal rates. Both parties agree to work in good faith to agree on the final rates.
So when do you anticipate that I at least would be able to see a completed document?
The numbers aren't going into this document. This is the document that they need for next week. The financial aspect of this is still being reviewed primarily on our side to make sure we know what it is that we could be getting to ensure that we negotiate that we get that amount. And there has not been sufficient time for us to do that. It's a rather unique project that was kind of, brought to us pretty tight timeline. So the letter of intent is meant to say, well, we'll negotiate in good faith, but we don't have an agreement as to any of the numbers at this point.
So I guess this body sits in two capacities here, or for two reasons. One, because we're dealing with town property and the prospect of leasing it to a party. And two, because we have, there's a financial component. And I'm comfortable with the concept. I don't see any other use for this property in the future. I just think that, we have a responsibility to know what the financial terms are. And
And that's, that's a legitimate point. And I think that when we started our discussions, that was one of the first things I said. You have to, on the one hand, understand that they're submitting a bid to an RFP, and they're looking to protect their information. But far more importantly, we haven't been able to do enough of our due diligence as to what we should be demanding. And so we wouldn't want to put any numbers in there until we're satisfied. And frankly, most of our time has been spent on the property tax issue because frankly, if we're not going to get property taxes on this, it's questionable whether or not we should do this. So we've spent some time because we were first concerned that there might be a property tax exemption. We're fairly confident at this point that most, if not all, of the project is taxable. There may be a very small component that is not. Shelby's been working on it. I've been working on it. We have word into, I think, OPM to see, if there's anything that we've missed. They've done their research, and because they're not used to dealing in Connecticut, and they don't believe, except for maybe a small portion, that they would be tax exempt. So that was kind of our primary focus, because I wasn't even going to recommend that we even go this far if we didn't feel somewhat confident. And that's why we've added language that protects us on the property tax too. But in terms of the what kind of a financial demand we should be making, that's really something that we are researching. We have Shelby working on it, and we're trying to find similar type projects. I was told today that Mira, which is the former CRA that owns the land adjoining this, is actually going to move into the option phase this week with them. So I guess those conversations have progressed farther than us. I asked, well, are any of the dollars public information? And the answer was no. There's no expectation that the lease payments are serious dollars. We're not talking about the Wallingford Energy project being a comparable project in terms of the revenues generated, either tax-wise or lease payment-wise. So, the bulk of the financial benefit to the town, it is our belief at this time anyway, rest in the property tax as opposed to the lease payments.
So
Just to clarify a little bit, the letter of intent gives them the ability to submit this, it's a submittal for the RFP. Once we get into the option discussion, then there will be detail, and at that point, either party can still get out. This doesn't bind us to enter into the option. This is telling basically the state agency that we are interested and we're going to try to see this through to a completion, but it's a letter of intent. It doesn't bind us to enter into an option or a long-term lease.
It binds us for 120 days to exclusively negotiate with them, and it binds us to act in good faith. We tried in this draft to give them as much as they needed to present to DEEP that the town is serious and that, it's not something that we're just going to say no to the next day, without compromising the fact that major portions of a prospective deal have to be worked out. I mean, we're talking about the use of a landfill, that involves DEEP. We're talking about an interconnection agreement with the electric division. So it's a very complicated transaction. So this is enough for them to present to DEEP that the town of Wallingford is seriously a potential party to a lease agreement with them, so that makes their project more serious, but it doesn't bind us other than to act in good faith in any negotiations that we have.
So procedurally, should the council approve this letter in its current form so that the RFP can go in, what would be the next step in the process?
The DEEP is expected to make a decision. They may not get the project. I don't know. I'm not sure how many projects DEEP is going to approve. The date is supposed to be in July. I asked, do you think that's a firm date? They thought, well, maybe it'd be pushed out a month or so beyond that, but they don't believe it be well beyond that. So they do think it's going to be rather timely. So, at that point, at this point, if the letter goes in, the RFP goes in, the bid goes in, I would expect we would start further negotiations to get ahead of everything. I'm not sure how much we want to, seriously invest until we know that they actually been awarded. But certainly we can look further into what we believe the financials should be. That research is ongoing.
So assuming that that's done between now and DEEP approval, and let's hope that the approval happens, would you be coming back to the council with?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, so the next step would come to us.
Yeah, the option agreement, which at the point where we're signing an option agreement, one, it's coming back for your approval, but it will actually have essentially the lease. I mean, it will all be tied into one document. So you absolutely will be deciding that you either accept or reject the terms at that time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Janice.
Good evening.
I understand the letter of intent that the town is willing to enter into this, but with this, what's in front of us, the lease option letter of intent as it's presented to us, there's a lot of detail in this. In the detail, you know, I mean, it goes right into the lease term of 22 years from the lease commencement date, and that's on page 5.
Yeah, it does have some of that detail, yes.
So,
It has to have some of the detail in it.
okay,
You know, a one-line letter saying the town of Wallingford is interested is not a sufficient
Okay.
for DEEP to consider that a serious project. So, you know, when we drafted this, we tried to balance their need for some degree of a commitment versus our need to be able to end the negotiations if in fact it doesn't turn out to be what we wanted. So yes, the 22 years is a firm thing that they're looking for because that ties in, that initial term ties in with the DEEP program.
okay.
And then, you know, we'll negotiate whether or not they get any extensions beyond that.
Okay.
So it has to have enough detail, and that's kind of why we added a catch-all saying, you know, this is a complicated matter, includes a variety of issues that are unresolved, and we're really committing to just act in good faith in those negotiations to flush all that stuff out.
On page 2, the option period, it says the term of the lease option shall be for 3 years,
Yes.
in parentheses, option period. What exactly, can you explain that a little bit?
The first part, the first 90 days of the option would be for a due diligence period for them to make certain determinations that whether or not it's a go from that point on. The remainder of the period of time is for the numerous approvals that they'll need to get, both on a local level. They have to deal with ISO New England. They have to deal with the electric division. DEEP would be involved. So that's the time period. We will negotiate a payment to be, for us to receive during that option, the 3-year period. I imagine if the timeline is shorter and it clicks in shorter, then the lease could kick in shorter. You know, I think that's the span of time they expect it take to have everything in line, considering
Okay.
what you have to
So
do.
basically, everything, if I'm understanding this correctly, everything in this document is to be negotiated.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's outlined some of the bare bone kind of things, but yes. I mean, the meat is under negotiation.
Okay.
And for us, in terms of, as I said, financially, I think it's understanding and having a good sense of what we're getting for property tax.
Okay. I mean, I you know, without any financials to this, I just want to make sure that the rest of this can be negotiated, because
Right.
if we're going to vote on it tonight, I'm okay with this as long as it can be negotiated down the road along with the financials.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing and hearing none. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. We'll start with the library on page 24 in your budget books. Sorry. Good evening.
Hello.
Please remind us who you are for the record.
Beth Brooks, board member. Jane Fisher, library director.
I'm Bob Carmody. I'm a board member, and I serve as treasurer for the board.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Do you have any introductory remarks or comments, or would you like to just skip to the questioning?
I'd like to say a few words.
Please do.
Every year I send along numbers and graphs and charts. And it's nice to pull those together to see what a really high-performing library we are. But I think what's also worth mentioning is some of the everyday things that happen that make our library really important in the lives of the community. I left the library at 6 o'clock, full parking lot, something going on in every community room in the library. It's a hustling and bustling place every day. The library is really the major player in town for supporting our early childhood literacy. We do a number of story times for as young as 1-month-old babies through the time when kids go to school. And even though we've expanded our offerings, they typically fill to capacity. We do homework help, including bilingual homework help. We do computer tutoring every week, several appointments available every week, mostly filled by senior citizens who are learning to use devices that they see their kids and grandkids use and wish they could harness themselves. We provide access to proprietary databases that students need to be scholars and succeed in school. We have a vibrant teen area where our kids can gather after school to socialize and do homework, read cool books and magazines, play Minecraft on a secure server, and really just be themselves in a supportive and safe environment. And then all day, every day, we help people navigate new online territory for them. And literally all day, every day, we help people do online job applications, figure out how to format a resume, apply for government benefits, take online exams, print out tax forms, reserve a quiet study room for study or business meetings, do wireless printing and scanning and faxing documents that really make us the hub of the community for so many needs. And of course, we lend movies and music and books and streaming and electronic books so that people don't have to go out and spend money on these things. They can borrow them from the library. So thanks to your support, we're open decent hours, so I think our community has really learned to trust that we're there when they need us. We have professional, kind staff that help people from all walks of life feel comfortable. I think people know that they can come to the public library and get a warm welcome. And naturally, I'm biased, but I can't help but think that your investment of less than $3 million really goes a long way to make our community shine. Bob, did you want to add anything?
Just in relation to the budget, just a couple of numbers. After our meeting with the mayor, the proposed increase for this year is 1.95% beyond what we received last year. And over the past 5 years, just to give you a sense, the average increase over those 5 years has been about 1.85% annually increase to us. So we've made an effort to keep those increase requests below 2%, and the same is happening this year.
Thank you. With that, we'll start with questions. Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jane, Bob, thank you for coming. My only question, I think the library does a great job. We have 2 small children. My mom was obviously a huge supporter, so our whole family loves the library. I just wanted to reconcile the budget situation with what happened in the children's room. And I thought it was important that you guys publicly kind of talk about that. I know there was a big reopening a couple Saturdays ago, but I just wanted to make sure, with this 1.95% increase, as all budgets have contingency. I know you guys fundraise, so I just wanted to make sure that, I don't know what insurance is covering. I know a lot of books were lost. What is the situation with the children's room, and do you have what you need in this budget?
So the insurance issue is not completely settled yet, but we're working with our insurer, and the insurance company has funded the cleanup that needed to happen immediately, the cost of it's kind of minor construction and the carpet, and we lost 10,600 books. So they have given us an advance to start buying those books. Where there continues to be some dialogue is the cost of the labor to process all those books and get them back on the shelves. They questioned at the estimates that we provided of the labor to do that. And as a result of that questioning, I also went out and got a quote to outsource that work. It comes in more affordable if we do the work in-house with staff working extra hours. We cannot absorb the labor costs of adding 10,600 books in 6 months. So it's not like we can just pick up that workload. So that's the piece we're still working on. And I hope it's going to work out that the insurance company will fully fund all those costs, but it isn't completely certain at this point. The town has been really generous. There some fundraising efforts started. When I mean the town, I mean residents started doing some fundraising to replace some books. We think the total loss is in the vicinity of about $260,000. And residents raised $16,000 towards the cost of books, which was really, it's not a big dent in the total loss, but people really wanted to help, and we were just delighted to accept those gifts.
From a budget perspective, in relation to your question, Chris, we've been informed that our insurance carrier will not renew our policy going forward. So we're not exactly sure the total budget impact yet, because we're now going to have to go out and find out. The experience has been such that with what happened in the children's room, they will not renew.
So your insurance rates are going to go up with a different carrier, most likely. And then of the 260, we've raised, so 16,000 was raised by the generosity of, residents. And then so do we have any ballpark of the remaining 234, what insurance might cover? Is we talking, tens of thousands, 100,000? Do we just don't have any?
No, and we received $100,000 to begin to purchase books, and we did receive some of the initial expenses and an agreement that the construction and the carpet would be covered. So I think it's going to be down to, I hope, a battle of maybe less than $50,000 as we try to wrangle with the labor costs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Letourneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. First, I'd like to start with thank you for what you do. It's a great resource for the town. The question I have is, I don't see in here, how many employees do you have?
We have 20 full-time employees, and we have a total of 53 employees. 20 are full-time, the remainder are part-time.
Or part-time?
Yeah.
I was just going through, I saw your budgeted amount for salaries and your payroll service, and then on the bottom of one of the pages here, it's factors affecting wage expense. Budget includes same number of full-time positions, but no place in here was how many employees. So I didn't know if you had 4 or you had, 54.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm fine with that. But again, thank you for what you do. It's great organization.
Councilor Sullivan?
Okay. I'll be the wet blanket here. I was going to ask about the number of employees as well, but you proposed a 2.5% increase in salaries, which is really not in scope or in line with most of the bargaining units that we deal with on a...
I don't know if you realize that that's been cut back since then. When we
I don't have that.
When we proposed the budget to the mayor made a slight decrease in what was allocated to us. So that's been decreased. The budget, he didn't come back that the salaries had to be, he came back with a $10,000 decrease. We decreased the salaries increase because of that reduction, which brought it down to 2%.
Oh, you're down to 2%.
Yes.
Okay. And Bob, is it possible, or Jane, is it possible to get a salary structure so we know who's making what?
Sure.
That's something that we normally get, and we'd appreciate seeing that as well. But outside of that, I can only reiterate what my colleagues have stated. One other item that stands out, and I don't know how true it is now that we've made some changes, but it looks like your postage dropped by 1/3.
So that line is postage, and miscellaneous. We are spending less on postage. As more of our cardholders sign up for email, we are able to send their reminders of overdue items or items that are on hold for them by email rather than through postage.
So we're saving money by using email.
We absolutely are saving money by using email at the library.
That's an interesting point.
Of course, the press isn't here, but
That's all right. Cameras are rolling. That's really all I had. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from the council? I feel like you got off easy.
It's okay with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Next is the Wallingford Historic Preservation Trust, page 44 in your budget books.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Richard Straub of Cheshire. I'm a board member on the Wallingford Historic Preservation Trust. I've been a board member for a little over 2 years, and I'm currently the recording secretary.
Okay. Would you like to start with some opening remarks? or-
Sure, yeah. Just to review, the Preservation Trust has 8 board members now. We've added 5 in the past 2 years, and 2 of those 5 are in the past couple of months. We manage 2 standing properties, the Johnson House and the Royce House. Recently, we've been going through somewhat of a renaissance. There seems to have been a period of inactivity over the past 5 years or so, maybe a bit longer through my experience. But since we participated in Celebrate Wallingford last October, we've managed to recruit 18 new volunteers. And these aren't just go-to step-and-fetch-it type volunteers. They're people with professional backgrounds. Some of the things we've been able to accomplish are an inventory, which is currently ongoing, of all of the items within the Johnson House. It has never been done before. It includes furniture, wall hangings, all of the silverware. It's on a international program called Past Perfect. About 9,000 small museums and historic houses like we have used that program. It's an interactive program. It requires photography, measuring, description of each and every item. It's all computerized. It can be, in the future, put on the web, trade information with researchers, and so on. In addition to that, we've been part of a STEPS program, which is sponsored by the American Association of State and Local History Organizations. 2 of us are regular members, and they allow other new volunteers to become participants as well. It's a training to upgrade the level of all the historic houses in Connecticut. We are in a small group of 5, and the overall group has 35 different organizations from Connecticut. It's been very uplifting for me. I don't come from a historic properties background, but my interest as I've grown older has gotten much more involved with historic things. We are also managing to keep a more regular schedule with open house so the public can see how we interpret Wallingford's history, the history of the Johnson family, the silver industry. And we also have some volunteers who have a specific interest in researching those stories that we need to tell the Wallingford community. I'll stop at that point and leave myself open to you folks.
Sure. We have your letter requesting $20,000 from the mayor.
Right.
And have you been notified about an award under the budget?
To my knowledge, no, but perhaps the treasurer of our organization or president knows.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
On page 44, line 58834, there's the historic program matching line of $30,000. Is that, Mayor, is that part of their allocation?
Well, that's right. The matching program benefits both the Preservation Trust and the Historic Society. $20,000 was available as a matching grant for Preservation Trust, and $10,000 for the Historical Society. I reduced that $5,000 each, so now it would be $15,000 for the Preservation Trust and $5,000 for the Historical Society.
And is that part of the budget restructuring that you're doing as a result of the reduction in the funding from the state?
No, this is the recommendation that was the proposal. So that had been $30,000. We made it $20,000.
Oh, I see that. I'm sorry. Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Straub.
Good evening.
The money that the town gives you, what is it used for?
Well, it's spread across all of our expense items. I'll summarize the major ones. The insurance alone on the properties that we have is $10,000 rounded.
Can I just stop you there?
Sure.
Does that include the property that's owned by the town? 'Cause the property where the Blakesley...
No, I believe it does not. I sat at a previous meeting a month ago when that property was discussed and talked with another board member, and we said, well, why would we insure something we don't own? So that's the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
That transaction happened many, many years ago.
Yes,
I believe.
and the trust is in effect the trustee, the caretaker for that property. Is that accurate?
I don't think so, Councilor Fishbein. I thought that we turned the property over to the state or to the town way back. The building was not easily saved. It had lots of problems, and when an attempt at investigation, actually part of it caved in, and I understand the property was raised, and we no longer maintain or control that property to the best of my knowledge.
Wait, because you were here, I guess about a month ago when Mr. Ross was sitting
Right,
there.
right.
And he was telling us about that property, and
Well,
I
that's-
came away with the understanding that the trust had some sort of caretaker responsibility with regard to that property.
That's indeed the meeting that I attended with Ray, and he's the person I asked about afterwards, and we both concurred that we don't think we have any responsibility for that property.
I believe that at one time it was owned by the Preservation Trust, then the town took ownership.
So
Subsequent to I think the building fell apart or whatever, and subsequently we took ownership.
Okay, so the representations that I continually see that the trust has to do with 3 pieces of property is not accurate then. It only has to do with 2 pieces, the Royce House and the Johnson Mansion.
Correct.
Okay. So then on the insurance, I would assume that the town has taken over that responsibility. I would assume.
Insurance on what?
On the property that was conveyed by the trust to the town of Wallingford.
Well, the town of Wallingford is the owner, so as far as I know, we own that property, so it would have to be covered by our insurance.
I would hope. Okay. So $10,000 to insure the 2 properties.
2 properties,
And
right.
What's the next item?
The next, Utilities alone for both properties are about just under $7,000 a year. Grounds maintenance, about $3,000.
Can I just, the utilities, is there running, I know there's running water at the Johnson Mansion. Is there running water at Royce?
Well, it's not exactly running. There is a water line into the basement of the Royce house. It's not operable. The Royce house has been closed for exterior renovation, and it's closed for interior renovation, which will begin very soon.
So then I'm to assume that $7,000 is just basically electric.
It's to have, you have to pay just to have the line brought there. Right. Well, there's an alarm system at the Royce house also. I believe it works, it needed a telephone hookup, so we needed electric with the landline.
All right, so all those utilities put
Right.
together are about $7,000.
Right.
Okay. The landscaping, I can understand.
Yeah. The building maintenance, you know, the Johnson House is about 25 years now since it's been renewed and requires some updating of windows and ceilings, doors. The alarm system had to be checked and batteries replaced recently. The chimney had developed a leak, and it was very puzzling. What we finally realized, the problem, I kept looking for water coming down, but the blocks act like a sponge, and they absorb moisture over a period of 3 or 4 rainy days or snow melting days, and then it transfers it below the roof line and down, and when it's done it consistently over a period of time, it then dripped on the floor. We've now corrected that. It took about a year to discover the cause because we kept looking for drips, and there was no drip. There was no hole in the roof. It was through the absorption. So the solution was relatively simple. They had to waterproof the chimney several times, and that stopped
But I would
it.
think the insurance would have covered that.
We had a cutoff. What do you call it? What's the word? A minimum.
Oh, okay.
Deductible?
Yeah.
So it didn't work for that.
All right, so last year, because we got no backup for your, it says on your letter, we have some additional supplementary materials which we will forward to the council closer to the budget workshops detailing the work of the trust. We didn't get anything.
Oh.
So I don't know if that was submitted, but so I'm trying to just do the big ones. So last year, how much did you spend in this kind of general maintenance?
Okay, adding the two, about $6,000 total.
Okay, what's the next large item?
The next item would be telephone lines to both properties are about $1,600.
Okay, and everything else is lower than that?
Yes.
Okay. So how much money does the trust have in reserves?
Well, we have about $180,000, but most of that, all but about 5 or 10%, is restricted to the Royce House property
Why is that?
because it came with that stipulation. The money was a donation.
So it's like a
to
will,
us.
somebody passed away and,
Well, the person still lives.
okay.
Yeah.
So do you
So
draw,
that, well, for example, we don't use that money. It's like taboo money, but sometimes it has to be used as a cushion. The example I can think of is when we were awaiting the final payment for the fence. We had to transfer funds for 1 month time and then put them back as soon as the check came from the town.
all right, so that would be,
So we
that would be violative of the,
Well, no, because not all the 180,000 is part of that. I don't know the exact breakdown. on how much has been spent on the renovations from that initial amount that was granted. It was a $200,000 donation, and I don't know how much of that is still part of the Royce House restricted money versus how much was already in our bank account.
So you don't deduct the maintenance expenses for the Royce House from the funds that are in reserve that are expressly for that purpose?
No, we do, but the work that was completed was several years ago, at least 4 or 5 years ago, and that did come from that. I'm getting a little shaky on my past information because I'm not sure if there was indeed another grant from the same donor.
But let's assume there's $150,000 in reserves that's just for the Royce House, and you have these maintenance expenses.
Right.
You're not using the money for those maintenance expenses?
Well, there have been no outlays of money for the Royce House in the past, not since I've been on the board, and I don't think for a couple of years before that.
Okay, so there's no utility expenses for the Royce House?
Well, those I already quoted you in the budget, and they're mostly just to supply the line. I mean, we have not been heating the house over the winter, the past couple of winters since I've been involved, so there's virtually no heating cost, but you have to pay to have the gas come to the house, the gas line. There's a monthly fee.
You said the utilities between the two properties was about $7,000.
Right.
And am I to understand that it's all $7,000 for the Johnson Mansion, or I would think they're relatively equal?
No. Okay, I see the point. No, of course, the fuel is the biggest cost, the gas used to heat the properties. But since there's a gas line charge monthly, whether you use gas or not, and then there's the usage fee for the Johnson House, but not for the Royce House. There will be, in the future, in the coming fiscal year, there will be need to pay for gas supply at the Royce House.
Okay, and
Because there will be completed.
I know there's
on the
electricity
interior.
at the Royce House also.
And we will then begin to have open house hours, so we'll have to heat it for the public.
So then am I to understand that those regular expenses, utilities, landscaping, things that you were talking about, are going to be deducted from reserves, or?
No.
just gonna sit on
No, it's from our operating budget. No, the reserve money for the Royce property is solely for the interior and exterior renovation, not for the ongoing maintenance.
Okay. I guess a question for the mayor. Mayor, how did you determine that these monies should be divvied up disproportionately?
Well, this goes back several years. There was a request from Preservation Trust for, at that time, it was meant to be just a short-term issue, but funding to help with whatever was going on at the time. I really felt that if we're going to help an historic organization or historic properties organization, we really have to include the Historic Society in that. They also have responsibilities, and included them within the $30,000. So I felt that we need to cut back on our spending, so I'm recommending reducing that $30,000, and the relative assignment of funds is, as I stated, the $5,000 and $15,000. But it's an effort to certainly support the organizations that are looking to perpetuate our historic properties, but it also recognizes the limitations of the availability of money.
So I'm just looking at why not do 10-10?
Well, because it was not 15 and 15 previously, it was 20-10.
Okay. Mr. Straub, the STEP program, Is that a requirement?
No.
Or that's optional?
No, we had to apply and we were accepted into the program. And it's a 1 day a month, basically, up at the Connecticut Historical Society in Hartford. And when they start a new unit of a new era, a new facet of the training, we have a 2 day a month program. And we are also invited to bring other volunteers or other board members.
And that's something that your organization pays for to go to? Or is it free?
No, I believe there was an application fee, but the reward has already come. Just last week, they set benchmarks for you. And if you complete all the levels that they require, you achieve a certain benchmark level and are eligible to apply for a grant. So we applied for a grant and we received it last week, $1,500. And it will enable us, as the program goes on, it's a 26-month program. We're into month 14 at this point. There will be future grants that we become eligible for by virtue of having participated in this program. And it's one of the other benefits for me is, you know, I don't know this field of work, and so I've made acquaintances with people from Guilford Keeping Society, the Windsor Tobacco Barn, the Darling House in Woodbridge, and so on. People that I would never, ever get to know otherwise unless I went to each of those properties, and then more than likely, I wouldn't meet a board member, I'd meet a volunteer.
Sounds healthy. With regard to the additional supplementary materials that you referenced in your letter, what did you intend on getting to us?
I believe it might be this sheet.
That's the budget?
It is. Would you like it? Should I give it?
Yeah, if you only have one copy, if you could just give it to the clerk and she could disseminate it to all of us electronically during the week, that would be great. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Straub. You're all set.
Thank you. I just want to say we do appreciate the gift that you give us.
Seems like you're putting it to good use. Up next, page 62, the public utilities.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen. Bob Beaumont, Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission.
George Adair, Director of Public Utilities.
Thanks for coming. Do you have any introductory remarks for us?
We're here, Mr. Beaumont and I, any questions regarding the PUC budget per se in the general fund section, and then I'll have other staff that will assist and appear for the electric, water, and sewer turn.
Yep. The order following the PUC will be water, then sewer, then electric.
Very well.
But the PUC is up now. Any questions on the PUC budget? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I thank you for getting better about minutes and because I'm able to review them. I've noticed that almost every meeting since August has only been attended by 2 commissioners. What is the status? I mean, we have no control over the appointments or anything like that. I believe, looking at the numbers, that stipends are still being paid. So what's going on?
Okay. You want to take it or want me to?
Mr. Nunn has been ill, and has still expressed interest in serving, but he is ill, and you know, whether he will be able to continue is a question being looked at. But it's been an illness that has kept him sidelined.
And I sympathize and, you know, have the utmost respect, but there's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're dealing with here. And, you know, I don't like this situation. So, once again, this body doesn't have the power to remove or appoint. We only have power over the purse strings, and I'm not comfortable with what's going on.
Well, I can tell you this, out of courtesy for someone who has devoted a long period of time to the town of Wallingford, I think he deserves the courtesy and the time to hopefully recover. If we are so abrupt that we cannot give someone with that kind of longevity and caring about the town, then I do think there is a problem. But Mr. Nunn, he wants to be better, and like I say, we're in touch with the family, and we will do what is in the best interest of everyone when that's appropriate. But for anyone to feel that we are not conscious of their own well-being and ability to recover without perhaps disturbing that with abrupt or untoward actions directed toward them, I think that's a very legitimate concern, and we need to be patient.
I agree. You know, I've been patient. I haven't brought it up until now, and but I read the minutes, and I've read a few meetings where there's only one commissioner present, the other commissioner is on the phone, and million-dollar decisions are being made. So
I can say there's been absolutely no contact with me by any council person with regard to this until right now. So if there is an overriding concern about it, I would urge anyone to come to me with that concern, and we can talk about it. But, you know, a person's health should not be the subject of a public meeting.
I agree. We have control over whether or not the payments continue, so that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Shortell.
I think this is maybe more of a question for Mr. Bowes, but so I was looking at the budget, and you look at certain things, and I noticed your office expenses went down, which is great. And then I thought, Mr. Bowes, do we have, so like account 56-100 or 55-105 transportation, is there, maybe I missed it, do we have that data across all the departments? If I was curious how that looked for the, town-wide?
I could run data. You mean as far as a category of expense?
And I'm thinking ahead to next week. There will be a lot of discussions about what we can afford and can't afford. And that, it just struck me. That's one of the things I look at. I'm just curious how different departments handle things like that. And I was gratified to see in this instance, even their budgeted amount was less than what they spent last year, which I thought was a good thing, even though it's a small amount. So I was just curious. It just sort of prompted the question in my head: how does that look across the board?
Oh, I think I understand you a little better. Thank you for clarifying. You're going to find, I think, not only in the office type of accounts, but in most of the general operating accounts, you're going to see pretty much things held pretty close to this fiscal year, if not lower, unless you run into a situation where a department might have to buy something once every 2 years or 3 years because there's some quantity discounts and things of that nature. I know just going through the process with the folks so far this year, there's really been an effort not to increase anything. As a matter of fact, and to decrease where it can be.
Okay. Is there a way though you can run that next week, or is there...
I can let me see what we can do. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the PUC? There being none, we will move on to the Water Division. Page 73.
Joining me immediately to my left is Mr. Brian Hickey, Interim General Manager of the Water and Sewer Divisions, Mr. Bill Phelan, the Business Office Manager for the Water and Sewer Divisions.
Thank you. On to questions?
Yes, I believe you have from Mayor Dickinson an overview of the budgets for each of the three divisions, so if that is suits the council, we'd be pleased to respond to any questions.
Questions for the Water Division, Councilor?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, inside of the sleeve of your binder, when those binders went out, is where we put actually Mr. Adair's overall for all three of the divisions,
Very good.
rather than make separate photocopies and put them into the sleeves. So there should be something universally in those sleeves for everybody. If not, I do have a few upstairs if you need me to go.
Thank you, Mr. Bose. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The line 602, purchase of water, it's a minor line, but it just jumped out at me. What is that? Why are we purchasing water?
We have a connection with the town of Meriden at the Coles Plaza on Route 5. That is where we purchase water from Meriden and supply that plaza, as well as 2 other properties in that area. So we are actually billed from the town of Meriden and pass those bills on to those customers.
Is that because we have no connections at that crest of the hill and the closest connections is Meriden?
I believe hydraulically we're unable to serve that elevation.
Okay, so I was going to do this at the end, but we'll do it now because it's the same general area. What's the status of the water situation with the contaminated wells up there? Have we been able to connect? I haven't heard anything.
The South Broad Street project
Yes.
you're referring to. Yes, it's moving along. I believe currently the surveying is still underway.
If I may, we just had the survey and boring work and easement work completed last week, so they will continue on with the process now as far as construction goes.
So the last we heard, if I recall correctly, there was an issue with, there's a planned unit development and/or condo development that an easement had to be obtained to get to the back.
Yeah, there's a different approach, not to interrupt, but that plan was abandoned, a number of months ago, and instead we were working with one of the property owners to obtain the easement, and in fact we've already done that, I believe, the surveying and the description has to be completed, but agreements are essentially in place to do this. And that property owner will also grant easements to 2 of his neighbors that have to pass briefly through his property. So we've worked that out among all the property owners, held a couple of meetings, and the completion of that step with the description and granting of easements is one of the things that will now proceed because the survey work has been completed. So everything is moving, if you will, on schedule as planned. There are no obstacles of which we're aware at this time.
So when do you expect that water is going to be hooked up?
My recollection last time we spoke is by the end of this construction season. So sometime by the end of this year, calendar year.
Is there a possibility, since you're going into that area, that you'd be able to eliminate this line? Because that's somewhat close to.
Eliminate which?
Well, you wouldn't be able to, at least for the Coles property, because it's slightly down the hill.
No, this would have no relationship to that.
Okay. The line 673, the maintenance, transmission, and distribution, there's an upward tick there. Seems to be out of line. What do you attribute that to? It's 395,000 to 423, line 673.
There are a couple of projects that we have scheduled for next fiscal year. One of them is being a leak detection program and the associated paving that would be part of that program once the detection survey is completed. So the 673 account is the maintenance of transmission and distribution mains. And once a leak is found by the survey, our crews will go out there, make any repairs necessary, and then follow up with appropriate paving. So those are estimated amounts, based on our historical leak detection surveys.
Okay. The contribution and aid line on the working capital, page 76, significant decrease. What is that from?
That particular account is based on what the divisions in both water and sewer division, anticipate being, the infrastructure that both divisions anticipate being donated to them through development of various projects. So a new condominium complex or a new development that goes in town, the developer installs both the sewer mains, the water mains, and those projects, once completed, the assets for that infrastructure are then turned over to the town. We didn't see many major projects for next fiscal year that were in the works, and therefore that number has dropped significantly.
So looking at last year compared to the actual on that line, and this is in effect an income line?
Well, if I may, there's an offsetting line in the section below, and from the standpoint of that there's no cash involved, it's seen as an increase in working capital from that accepting for perpetual maintenance, and you see on the other side use of funds the same amount. So it isn't as if there's any revenue stream or any net benefit from a cash standpoint at all.
And I guess you can't sell a sewer main, in effect. I mean, so it's not, I guess it's, is it fair to say this is a placeholder? I mean, you're acquiring an asset that really isn't transferable to anybody else, and you need to put it somewhere.
That would be a way to look at it, as a placeholder, because we really don't know what the value of any particular item is going to be.
From an operating statement standpoint, it doesn't matter in the sense that it's in and out at the same value. There's no, as you see, there's no.
Yeah, so there's
it's not a source of funds.
There's no financial impact at all.
Correct.
On
Your
this
depreciation
line.
would increase slightly. We do.
In the following
Put that
fiscal
to
year.
plant. In the
Yes.
following year, depreciation would go up because we now have a greater plant value. That's on the income statement. You would see that. It wouldn't affect
So
from a
if
cash flow
depreciation
standpoint.
goes up. Okay, so if you underestimate what your receipt of capital is going to be.
We will square that up once that number is actually determined.
Because I'm looking at last year we approved a capital inflow of anticipated $379,000. And through 7 months, it was only $25,000. So.
It's not capital. I mean, it's a capital item in the sense that it's
an
part
acquisition.
of our plant, but it's not, there's no dollars there. So this is literally, it's a necessary bookkeeping step, and it does describe the value on the books of real things in the ground, but from the standpoint of net income, other than its effect on depreciation in subsequent years, other than that, it is, I don't want to say immaterial, but it has a zero net, it's a zero net sum game.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
But if anything, the variance would be in the depreciation, so. Okay, I think that's all. I guess the only other thing I had is well, two other things. The I&I program, is that is that funded in here?
Well, that
as
would be
far
the
as-
sewer division.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I made the note at the wrong place. Okay, and my other item is for sewer also. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Any other questions for the Water Division? Thank you, gentlemen. Up next, the Sewer Division, page 79. And there is no change in the personnel.
Nope.
All right. Councilor Fishbein, I know you have questions. Anyone else want to queue up? Councilor Fishbein, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's start where we left off. The I&I, is it funded in this budget as far as the reimbursement program?
Yes.
And can you identify where that is?
That would be located in account number 673. You'll see that that account itself has not changed very much because we have made it another adjustment from that account. And if I may explain, we have reconsidered our position on the handling of linings in the sewer division, sewer main linings. Typically, that it has been expensed over the last several years, and the dollar value of that is approximately $450,000 to $500,000 per year. We thought it was more appropriate that that amount be capitalized over 25, 50 years, the life of that project and the lifespan of that particular project. And so you will see in the capital side, so there's a reduction of 500,000 in that 673 account. However, it's offset by this increase in the I&I funding of $400,000. So that what you look at net is not a very big change. There is a change, but you don't see the full impacts of the reclassification of the linings and the uptick in the I&I funding.
And what is the status? I mean, have we engaged any properties in this program? About how much have we paid out? How many properties have we been involved with? That kind of, what's the success?
On April 13th, we had a public meeting up around the New Rock Hill neighborhood area, and we've done 2 or 3 inspections up in that neighborhood right now. Total, we're probably in the range of 15 to 20 inspections, and the New Rock Hill area is a target area because we know there's known problems up there through system inspections, and also the I-91 pump station is historically overwhelmed during certain rain events, and the sewer division needs to go up there, typically with a Vector truck to try to transfer wastewater flow out of the station sort of manually and bring it to another location to keep the station from surcharging and creating an overflow situation.
The camera crew is having trouble picking up your voice, so if you could move the mic a little closer.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All in all, it's in the early stages. We're still in the process of hiring the full-time inspector who will be a key to this. We've gone out now our second round seeking that person. And in fact, expect to be making, we hope, a conditional offer this week to an individual to fulfill that task or to fill that position. So it's getting started. We've had a meeting with realtors and closing attorneys that I think went very well, was very well received. And we're in contact with the association that performs the home inspections for the buyers in Connecticut. And our interest there is enlisting their help. And I think, Brian, you and Seth Lentz, our engineer planner, have talked with us folks about our presenting a class to these the inspectors. I&I sources are not today part of their standard checklist that they're required to assess. But speaking to the vice president of the organization, a lot of interest on his part in bringing that into their fold. So it's like anything else. It's going to take a while We've also, I think, how many of the flow meters do we have in? I guess all the ones that are to be installed.
Yeah, we have a total of 14 flow meters in the sewer system, and 5 of them currently in that New Rock Hill area to help us better isolate the excess flow that we're, seeing up there, so we can go after and eliminate those problem houses. So the last part of your question was how many have we actually sort of modified, and there's two that have made redirections, and we've paid out approximately $3,700 for that.
Okay. I thank you for the brochure. I did come over to town, this building, and I got a copy because I had some people contact me who happen to do closings, and they wanted to know because they thought it was mandatory and all that stuff. So I was able to send that out to them.
So in answer to your question, it's early days, it's getting started. Those with whom we've met and discussed it, we found a very warm reception, I think particularly among those in the realty and real estate community, and understanding of the need for this program. So look forward to providing further updates as the momentum gathers, but it's early days.
Thank you. The looking at the working capital, page 81, there's the phosphorus study design, the $500,000. Where is that funding coming? Well, it's coming from us.
Yes.
Well, from you guys. It's coming from the utility.
Yes.
And given all of the money and time and effort and lobbying that's been done with regard to this issue, what is the intention of these funds?
Well, let me give you a brief rundown. As you probably know, we have an NPDES permit issued by DEEP for the wastewater plant. That permit contains the standard or limit, which is a concentration limit for phosphorus that we meet today. It also contains a schedule of implementation actions that we're required to meet, which leads ultimately to, unless amended, the permit as it was issued few years ago, requires that by April 1st, 2020, we begin meeting the phosphorus standards, and I think we've got to be in full compliance by April 30th of 2020. And the first step identified on that timeline is that by December 15th of 2017, we must have retained one or more consultants that have to be approved by the Commissioner of DEEP to undertake a very substantial study. And the results of that have to be submitted to the DEEP by October 31st of 2018. And we are getting, with this funding, a bit of an early start on this, because we believe that the information it will produce, which is to evaluate the alternatives to achieve compliance with the standards that are in the permit, will certainly be requiring that consultant to provide very detailed cost information for those. There are a number of very specific requirements in the permit itself for what that report must contain. So that's something that, again, we have to have retained them by December of 17. We're looking to start that earlier because we view that information as important to be able to make the case we intend to make with the DEEP regarding the cost of compliance versus the potential benefit. But that study is one step along the way, and the scope is spelled out in the permit. So that's the why part of it.
So we would be doing this proactively whether or not DEEP was requiring it to be done?
Well, if DEEP were not requiring us to meet a limit which is substantially below the one we currently meet, no, I don't. Obviously, I'm sure that wasn't a question.
But because of the standard, we have to do this proactively, but DEEP has set the timeline.
Yes, if we don't do it sooner, we have to have at least engaged that party no later than the end of December of 17. We thought it was prudent to fund this to start it earlier than that. We do not anticipate, although we certainly intend to pursue any arguments that we think are valid relative to the affordability or lack thereof of this. Absent our making that case, there is certainly zero probability that DEEP will amend or suspend anything in the permit. So it's up to us to demonstrate something to the contrary. So that's what that's for. And that's, of course, an estimate. We haven't completed or even produced a scope of work. We haven't gone to bid, but we're budgeting funds for that purpose. Mr. Hickey prepared, I think, the estimate and at least a draft scope of work. Brian, you want to comment on?
Sure. Yeah, and the cost there was based on a similar study done in another community that I'm familiar with. So as a starting point, that's where the $500,000 comes for. And it's going to be looking at different technologies to achieve the very low permit limit that's expected. And the scope of work, would be, looking at technologies, pilot testing, and also looking at other items at the wastewater treatment plant that probably are due for updates and upgrades just because the plant is somewhere in the vicinity of 30 years old. So there could be code issues that would need to get addressed as a result of the extensive study and quite a lot of site work that might be required as well, and permitting.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, but moving on with the working capital, the lines, and they don't have numbers, the inspector and the reimburse program appropriation from I&I, how is that different from what was represented to me before to be in line 673, or is it a breakdown of that?
The 673 account includes the expenditures for the direct reimbursements for the I&I program. Throughout the budget, we allocate labor charges in a bunch of various places. Labor is associated with probably 13 different accounts in the sewer division. However, what we've done is we've identified the estimated cost for hiring an inspector, providing him with a vehicle, tools necessary, as well as any supplies required. And we've calculated that at approximately, and benefits as well, and we've calculated that at approximately $112,500. In addition to the $112,500, we have $400,000 in the 673 account that is for the direct payment of the reimbursements. Those two items together are funded through a reserve that we have, an I&I reserve, that we have appropriated $350,000 for over the last few years in anticipation of this particular project and these types of expenses. So the 673 account includes the expense, the source and use of funds. The working capital section shows you where we're drawing those funds from in order to pay those particular I&I expenditures.
So, putting the money aside, the $300,000 over the last 3 years is a carryover. We do that with fire trucks sometimes, sometimes.
Yes, you'll see that, as a matter of fact, as one of the use of funds in the sewer division, you'll see that $350,000 is allocated for the I&I reserve. Again, this fiscal year.
Bill, I think it was a bit of a misunderstanding, though. This is not capital money.
No.
Nothing that goes in, the lining of our own mains is capitalized. As we said, that's a change from expensing it. But all of the expenditures for the inspector and all that needs to support that person, and all of the expenditures for the reimbursements are expensed. The $350,000 that Bill's referring to is that out of the annual revenue stream received by the division from its rates and other incomes, $350,000 is, if you will, earmarked and placed into this reserve account. So it's not there's not a capital carry forward, or there's no capital money involved in that function.
So it wasn't accumulated over the last 3 years?
It has been. $350,000 out of the revenue stream has been set aside actually for 3 or 4 years.
Yes, this will be the fourth year currently. And, but the reserve monies does sit and in the bank. it then carries forward per se. It's not a capital account, but, you know.
Well, that was just my example.
Yeah.
So, because what I'm looking at and the way the book is structured, the line where it says use of funds and reserve for I&I would read that line to be interpreted that there is a deposit, so to speak, this year into this reserve account in the amount of $350,000.
You are correct.
Yes.
Okay, so, but there's already monies in that reserve account?
You are correct.
Okay, so, and just because we got down this road, is there somewhere that shows how much is in that reserve account? Or?
Not in your budget pages, but naturally, we have detail of that.
Any idea? I mean,
Yes. After this year, it'll be $1,400,000.
okay, and that's, okay. That's solely to reimburse these
It's
problems?
actually for any I&I related expenditures that
So it's could be
we deem appropriate for that.
Could be for the inspector?
Could be, yes.
And it could be for remediation of these problems?
Correct.
Yeah, we also have materials that we purchase for the program too, so that's part of the.
Okay, it all falls in that line. Okay. Yep.
Councilor Fishbein, if I may, it sounds like you've got a bit of a head of steam going. How much longer do you think you'll have with this division?
I have two items. 10 minutes, maybe?
Okay. Would you mind yielding at this point if we could get the electric division up? Councilor Sullivan has some questions for them, and he has to leave.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Gentlemen from the electric division, if you wouldn't mind coming up.
I didn't do it for you, Rich. I did it for me.
And I'm sure in the interim, the sewer division will be studying up for the rest of
I get
Councilor
to study.
Fishbein's questions.
I get to hang in here.
And would you gentlemen mind, after you introduce yourselves, would you mind if Councilor Sullivan cut to his chase?
Richard Hendershot, General Manager, Electric Division, and not at all.
Tom Sullivan with the Business Office.
Thank you. Councilor Sullivan.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleague for yielding. I appreciate it. Thank you. Gentlemen, really one question. Page 71 of the budget, general plant. Help me reconcile in my mind how this works. When I look over your actual spending, bottom line, it comes to about $54,000 and budgeted in the 2015-2016 budget was over $500,000. You with me, Rick?
Yes.
Okay.
Good for you.
First of all, why did we budget so much and use so little?
Well, you're looking at anomaly for fiscal 15. I would point particularly to account 392, transportation.
Did you say anomaly? I'm sorry.
An anomaly.
Okay, thank you.
Look at account or 392.
Got it.
Transportation.
Yep.
We typically we budget and ultimately purchase $250,000 to $350,000 worth of vehicles every year.
Yep.
We didn't get bids out and therefore money spent in fiscal 15 out of that budget. Those funds then carry over and are spent in subsequent years. But when that happens, they don't show up as actual expenses here. This is as of June 30, 15.
So the plan, Rick, was to buy vehicles. You didn't get the bids out. You didn't buy vehicles during this budget year.
Not out of those funds. There may have been carryover funds from previous years, and those were used in that time frame, but then that wouldn't show up here either because they weren't budgeted funds in that year.
Okay. What happens to all this money? Where does it all go?
It stays, for lack of a better way to say it, in the bank, in the checking account until it's spent.
Okay.
And if in any capital account in our budgeting, if it's not, if between my office and the comptroller's office and then ultimately approved by this body, it's not carried forward, it leaves that account and stays in our retained earnings accounting-wise, which is where it is when it's not spent anyways, but it's sort of earmarked for use in these capital accounts. It's available in those capital accounts, subject to carry forward approval for 3 fiscal years after the years in which it's budgeted, and then it goes back into retained earnings. There is no more carrying it forward if it isn't encumbered
3
by
years.
then.
So just so I understand it, in my mind, that the plan is still to buy vehicles, even though they weren't purchased in this budget year, 2015, 2016. That money remains in
Yes.
retained capital earnings, right?
Yes.
And now we're going to add to that another $506,000.
Not for vehicles, but for all the collection of all of those general plan accounts, yes.
Okay, but the vehicles were $372,000.
In fiscal 16, yes.
Right, which still leaves about almost $300,000 that went unspent, even if we take the vehicles out, right? Around, approximate.
Well, that's the difference. It wasn't unspent. Much of this has been spent.
Much of this has been spent?
Possibly since, well, now you're looking at the 15, 16, the year we're in.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 15, 16.
Yes.
So we had $372,000 budgeted, most of which you say the bulk of that money was vehicles.
The vehicles have been ordered, if they haven't been delivered yet.
Oh, okay. So that's why. So that money for those vehicles will come out of this 2015, 2016 budget?
Correct.
Okay, that's important. Thank you. And now we're adding to that about $275,000 on line item 392.
Yes.
So the plan is to continue, you're purchasing more vehicles, obviously?
Yes.
Okay, so are you on a rotation plan here on your vehicles?
Yes, to look at it, we have 9 line trucks.
Yep.
We typically plan to buy 1 a year.
Yep.
That means
Okay.
the average truck we're trading in is 9 to 10 years old.
Okay.
And by that time, it's starting to behave that way.
All right.
And then the smaller vehicles, meter reader vehicles, meter technician vans, the small SUVs or pickup trucks that people drive around, lots of short trips. They're parked outside. These are age and hours worn out vehicles, not miles worn out vehicles.
Sure.
And we look at that annually. There's also equipment trailers, things of that nature, and there's a certain lumpiness to it, but that's how we handle vehicles.
Okay. I thank you for the explanation. I understand it now. Mr. Chairman, I thank you, and Craig, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Do we have a lot more questions for the electric division?
I have a bunch. I'd like to take off. I just wanted to follow up on, and then you can go anywhere you want.
All right. Well, if you're following up on Councilor Sullivan's questions, then that makes sense. So Councilor Fishbein, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But looking at what has happened in the past, if we just say that last year was an anomaly, what happened the year before? Because, and just looking at line 392, just focusing on that line, the year before, which was the entire year, you only spent $250. And I can almost guarantee you hundreds of thousands of dollars were appropriated for that year. So this is a snowball rolling downhill, and I mean, how do you explain that?
Well, it has to do with sometimes the prioritization of work, sometimes the ability to craft vehicle specifications one at a time by non-vehicle experts, which is what we are, and allocating staff time to do what needs to be done.
But if 2 years ago you appropriated a couple $100,000 and none of it got spent, and last year you were appropriated $372,000 and we don't know how much of it got spent.
Right now, we are caught up. Tom, maybe you can.
Yeah, if you're discussing the 2015 numbers, the $250 that was spent in the fiscal year ending June 30, 2015, in this current year, we carried forward into the year $302,822, and that has been spent at this time. So it was carried forward because of the delay in doing the specs, procuring and whatever, but it has been spent.
How much was budgeted that year?
Originally,
how much was approved?
I don't have those figured. The original appropriations for 15, I don't have. All we've got is fiscal year ending 16
I
and
still think
17.
it's
Probably a little bit less than that number.
Yeah, so then.
But certainly well north of $200,000.
If you're caught up to 2 years ago.
No, we're caught up to now. All the monies in previous fiscal years and in the one we're sitting in now have either been spent or encumbered.
Well, it would have had to been at least 303,000. We spent 250 and we've carried forward 3028. So.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, there's a couple $100,000 I think that are off, but okay. That's my follow-up, Mr. Chairman. I don't know where you want to go at this point. I can go back to sewer, or somebody else can take the ball.
Councilor Zandri informs me that he has a quick question for the electric division.
Yeah, hi, good evening, gentlemen. I just want to make sure that when I'm looking at this, I get an understanding. When we're talking about the total capital line or any of the individual lines, that's all coming out of, whether it's the water division, sewer division, or the electric, that's coming, the budgeting here and the expenditures is coming out of the earnings, correct?
Yes.
It's coming out of the rates.
Yes, yeah, right.
Well, yeah, all right.
We got to be careful of the
Careful
words.
how you say it.
We could
You're
borrow
right.
for a capital project.
Right, so the rates that are charged, what people end up paying, what you end up taking in as a gross, this is the net differential. There's no taxes here. This is basically.
No tax dollars flow to support.
Right, and because, I'm looking at the different lines and I'm saying, it looks like, but we're not funding it from taxes. You guys are funding your own businesses.
100%.
Yes.
All right, that was it. I just wanted the clarification in my head. So I appreciate the answer. Thank you very much.
Yep. I guess we're going to stick with the electric division for a little while longer.
Should.
Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the situation with the streetlights? Because I think Mr. Zandri Sr. has given up on expressing his frustration, and I still see streetlights that are out. And we pay the electric division for them. So what's the current process with regard to making sure the streetlights are lit?
We respond to all notices that streetlights aren't working. We repair them rather promptly when we're notified of them. We've done a few evening patrols. I think we've agreed to do 2 or 3 a year. That'll be 2 guys, 2 vehicles, roam a particular areas of town, find the lights. They're not repairing at that time, so they can cover more ground. They generate a list of noted lights that aren't working, and we write up those street light repair tickets and then work that list down.
How do you compute this $445,000 expense that the taxpayers, in effect, pay the electric division for this service?
You're asking about the structure of the rates for streetlights?
Yeah, I mean, is it, streetlights times X equals?
Largely, yes. There's a fixtures charge, which is based on the existence of the plant, the cost of it, and its ownership and upkeep. And then there's the energy, and streetlights aren't metered. And so it's assumed that streetlights are on, 4,000 hours a year times an energy rate that is significantly less than typical energy rate because we recognize that it's off-peak. It's not contributing to the system peak. It does contribute to transmission peaks. And historically, it's, the energy in the middle of the night is less expensive than the energy in the middle of the afternoon. And that's reflected in the energy charge for the lights.
So what if we worked together on this and we had more periodic spot checks in exchange for periodic payments?
We discussed this matter with Mayor Dickinson in some detail and went over the various options. And I won't speak for the mayor, but I think based on the meeting and the direction we received, that the present method of relying on reports and reacting promptly to them, and I think it was either 3 or 4, I forget the number of patrols that we decided were appropriate, and we certainly welcome and encourage reports of street lights that are out.
So I take it that the answer is in the negative.
I'm not sure what the question was. Perhaps I preempted your question, so I apologize.
Well, my suggestion was to work together to assure that the streetlights are on and that there's patrols on a more frequent basis and some sort of accountability, and then perhaps payment against this line. For instance, I mean, we have 20 different zones in town, which the engineering department uses for maintenance of sidewalks. The electric division could take, divide up the year, 20 different periods. In this period, you got to check out zone 1, 2, 3, whatever. Come back, yes, all the lights are on. Okay, here's a check. I mean, that's, I think, working together outside the box.
That could certainly be done. We would need to include the cost of that in the streetlight rate, because each rate class, of course, has to bear the cost and ideally the full cost of any services peculiar or particular to that class. So it would have to go into the rate-making process to do that on an ongoing basis. I will add that the item that is in the budget, that's a change in the budget, is I believe it's an estimated 4-year time frame, Rick?
Yes.
To convert all of the street lights in town to LEDs, which have a much longer life. And the resultant lower fixture charge, of course, a much lower energy charge, but also a lower fixture charge, is predicated on the knowledge, we think pretty well proven with a well-established technology, of far less maintenance cost per street light. So I would posit that that's likely the most practical and, reasonably available here over a 4-year period to go ahead with that conversion. And that's intended to be done as we visit the street lights and address any lights that are out.
I think my letter indicated that it's a $600,000 cost for this coming year. Is that right?
Yes.
So that's 1/4 of it, $600,000 to start that process. So it is expensive, but hopefully it will have those results.
It's a capital investment by the electric division, and all of the expected savings resulting from that investment are passed through to the town, the ratepayer. And that would perhaps be seen, and quite sincerely, as a working together, a $2.4 million investment over 4 years.
Plus about $200,000 worth of loss of
plant,
of plant that's not fully depreciated when the old light heads come down.
Yeah. So, and there is some rate impact on that in that the amount of depreciation will go up and the non-depreciated plant is booked as a loss and all of that. But nonetheless, if a private company made a $600,000 per year investment for 4 years, that private company would, of course, hope to sell the product at the same price, get more business, or do something to affect a payback. Relative to the electric division itself, there is no payback for this, but that isn't the point. We serve the community, we serve the taxpayer, and so this rather substantial investment will have the effect of lowering the town's cost and getting all the lights on that lower cost basis over a 4-year period. So that's a pretty substantial effort, and one that will yield, we think, some very tangible benefits for the town.
And when do you intend to start the conversion?
This summer, the specifications for all the lights are to purchasing. They can begin to bid them, subject to budget approval. They could generate bids where purchase orders could be cut right after the first of the fiscal year. We're working with a rate consultant on updating all of our rates, including streetlight rates, and right now the target date for implementing new rates is the 1st of September. So somewhere in that time frame is when I would expect we would start receiving the LED lights. And then the way we would react to failed streetlights is we would replace the entire luminaire rather than just change out a light bulb or a photo cell or a ballast.
So that's the plan, is as they fail to replace them with LEDs?
Yes, that way there's no difference in the labor cost of getting the work done, because we would roll the truck to change the light bulb or the photo cell or the ballast. And so instead of doing that, we won't troubleshoot the light. When we respond to a failed street light, we'll go out with a box with a new LED luminaire in it and change out the entire head. And then there's a new light there.
You know, I don't want to micromanage, but, you know, a lot of the lights that I see out are an extension of, if not part of, the lower downtown area. And, you know, it would be nice if
Speaking about
we could-
the ornamental lights?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have by far the most expensive lights in the system, and by far the least reliable and have the shortest lifespans.
So is it possible that,
Oh, they're going to be part of the change-out, too.
I would expect, but I would hope not through attrition, but maybe just, you know, center on the downtown, get it done, and then do the others?
I don't know the cost of those. I know new heads are nearly $1,000 a piece. I expect LEDs to be in that same neighborhood, and there's 150 or more of those lights.
And not, because I brought it up recently at some meeting, but is there a plan to, when the downtown, the ornamental lights are replaced, to maybe have the poles painted? Because I was told that it's your job.
It's time to do that, yes. I don't have a specific plan for that, but I don't disagree that, once again, this is I wasn't part of the original decision, but those are aluminum poles. The paint does not hold up well. And in the areas where they are, flower baskets, bicycles, snow plows, they take some abuse. They're located quite close to the curb, and then, you know, the paint wears.
Yeah,
And it does not last.
They look old.
And
they look, period.
And they were repainted, many of them were repainted in my tenure here, which is less than 12 years. And you know, nothing else we do requires that kind of maintenance cycle.
Yeah. The last thing I had was a line that jumped out at me, line 685, which is I don't know, it's
You on electric?
Electric?
Yes. Streetlights and signals. Significant decrease, but it seems to ebb and flow.
585 you meant, right?
Yes, 585, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the recognizing that in the upcoming year, instead of repairing streetlights, we're going to replace them. The line crew labor dollars that would normally be in 585 have been moved into the capital account.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the Electric Division? Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. My favorite line, 904, uncollectible accounts. What can you tell me about that?
What would you like to know?
As much as possible.
We're expecting a modest decrease in that amount. I think we've reached about the maximum, our maximum ability to collect, I think, is around this number. I don't know how much better we could do without bringing significant more resources to bear on the situation. And Tom, what percent of total is this?
Typically hovers around 0.3% of our annual sales. So as a percent, it's not a large number, but obviously look at the dollars.
Yeah,
It means a lot to you and I. Yeah.
There is a
I
growing
understand.
amount of dollars here reflecting certain Connecticut laws and how they pertain to people with certain documentable medical conditions where then we cannot terminate service. And so what leverage we have for obtaining collections largely disappears. To merely hold the line in this account means we're actually doing a better job on all other non-payments. And this line also includes not just electric bills that aren't paid, but accidents where insurance doesn't cover it. Someone without auto insurance strikes a pole, and we spend $5,000 that night restoring service. And there's no insurance company after which to go, then this claim goes to law, it goes to small claims, deals with the individual there, and if we're lucky in 2 years, we're getting an offer to settle for pennies on the dollar.
I know last year we talked about it a little bit, and the year before we talked about it. Has there been any movement with the state as far as the moratorium, so to speak, the medical moratorium or any of that? Because it seems like a program it's a great program, but it's also a greatly abused program.
We introduce it to our legislators every year. I'm not aware of anything afoot this year at
it's-
all from our lobbyist on this.
I don't think there's any traction in Hartford
nothing,
to
no.
address
I know
that
the
issue.
IOUs are not pushing this.
Yes,
I think,
their problem is much worse than ours.
yeah, but they're,
In both real and relative terms.
yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we can hope that it'll get better. It's a lot of money. I just see it, growing every year, little bit by little bit by little bit, and,
It's actually come down the last couple of years. I think that's, we've got a full-time supervisor in this area that can spend a fair amount of her time on this issue.
We peaked in 2013 and came down since, yeah.
It's obvious that when the economy was worse, this line got worse. When the economy got somewhat better, this
Right.
line got better. And like I said, I think we've sharpened our pencils on this about as much as we can, given that this number will never get to zero.
Understood.
It can't. How low can we drive it?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the electric division? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Back to the sewer division. Thank you for sticking around.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, but apparently so, yeah. Yeah, that's what he told me. Yeah.
Back to Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, going back to page 81, the use of funds, regular capital, that line appears to have doubled. What do you attribute that to?
I will say that we mentioned it earlier when we spoke about the reclassification of the lining program from operating expense to the capital. That represents $500,000 of the increase in the sewer capital budget. The additional increases are various locations. I could give you some ideas to that.
What's the largest of that additional 300,000?
We do plan to purchase a new truck, TV truck in the sewer division, at a cost of approximately $120,000. There are some, it's a generator purchase that was planned for the Grebe Road pump station at $60,000.
And the phosphorus?
And we have, in the regular capital, we have the grit washers. We have both a forklift and some additional monies allocated or anticipated for the purchase and installation of grit washers at the sewer treatment plant. Those are primarily the 3 or 4 largest items.
And is this phosphorus in this line as well?
Well, the phosphorus wasn't in the line that I.
Oh, okay. Shows up differently, yeah.
Yeah, it shows up as a separate line item.
It's above the 500,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's above. Is there a reason why, I know we've gone through this before and maybe I'm rehashing, is there a reason why you don't break out, I mean, Public Works breaks out, you know, we're going to get a snowplow and a backhoe and all of that stuff.
Well, we do provide that detail.
In the detail, but it's not in...
Yeah, but it's not in the actual budget pages themselves, right?
Okay. Just okay, the detail, I appreciate the detail, but
Gotcha.
It's, you can understand it's easier just to,
Sure.
you know, see the breakdown. So the last thing I have is the plant. So we keep on hearing about, because of big bad state and federal government and phosphorus, that we're more than likely going to have to do some changes to the plant. But on the other hand, the plant as it exists is 30 years old and has some outdated equipment. So, and some people say, well, you're going to have to replace the plant anyway. What is the story with the plant?
Well, yeah.
Let's just say, and let me just clarify, if the situation with the phosphorus is resolved and everybody backs off, aren't you going to have to replace the plant anyway?
Well, not the entire operation. The UV disinfection at some point will need replacement. There are components that are aging that will be part of a capital budget, just as there have been components at the water treatment plant. So phosphorus installation of a significant new technology isn't the only thing facing the plant. But to be clear, I think perhaps on how we stated it is, if there were a major project for phosphorus, if one were going to bond a significant amount for that, it is likely we would look at our nitrogen treatment and what we're paying for nitrogen credits. And we've looked at that periodically over the years, how much further to go with the efficacy of that treatment. Would there be a payback to avoid purchasing nitrogen credits? So as with any large installation, of course, faced with a major expenditure and construction job, one would be obligated to look at everything else just to see if there was any economy of mobilizing a major contract. But that doesn't mean we're just 2 or 3 years away from a major plant rehab anyway. We might as well throw in phosphorus. That's not how we're situated. So I guess I'm trying to understand your question, but hopefully that's helped.
If the phosphorus issue went away, would you have to replace the plant anyway?
You say the plant. I guess I'm a little confused. I mean, we're not going to build, of course, a new treatment plant.
A lot of the concrete structures are still going to continue on. So that's probably one of the biggest aspects of the plant is the concrete structures themselves, and the mechanical equipment and electrical equipment associated with it can get changed out over time. You know, one of the other big pieces of equipment that needs to get changed out is a belt filter press for processing sludge. So that the plant can continue. You don't have to start over and construct a brand new plant. You can make repairs, upgrade equipment, and continue a useful life for the plant for some time to come.
But what about the capacity issue? Because isn't that going on at the same time?
No, there's no issue there at all. The plant's designed for 8 million gallons a day, and as we've discussed previously, the remedy to the fact that it is occasionally overwhelmed with flow rates that can be higher than that, sometimes significantly so, is to solve the problem at the source of I&I. The thought of building a plant, I think numbers we've looked at it, and this is several years ago. If you went up to like 12 MGD, might be north of $30 million. And again, it'd be the worst conceivable reason to build a bigger plant to handle more clear water. So, no, I mean, I think with dry weather flow, in other words, with essentially no effective rainfall of around 4 MGD for our plant, it's pretty apparent that the legitimate uses of the wastewater plant are not, stressing it in terms of its capacity.
All right, so since I don't have a lot of backup with regard to reserves, is the sewer division putting money into reserves to allow for the replacement of facilities that you've already identified separate and apart from the phosphorus?
We were doing that up until this year, and instead we are preparing a 5-year, even with a 10-year general, but a 5-year capital improvement plan to assess our available cash, borrowing power, and all means to address capital needs over the long haul. The practice had been putting money into reserves and more or less paying as we go. And as you know, on the water side, that's resulted in a pretty steady progression of rate increases over a number of years. We had occasion recently to step back and look very carefully at that entire structure, and we determined that a perhaps more prudent and useful approach was to assess the balance between spending the cash on hand, which is still fairly substantial. Mr. Phelan can tell you what those balances are, along with funding capital from our revenues every year, which we do for both water and sewer, and then from time to time, for projects for which it makes sense, look at additional bonding, particularly as we're paying off debt from the past, and establish hopefully a healthy and reasonable balance between debt and paying as you go. So we're having occasion to look at all of that very carefully. We've had one workshop with the PUC and look forward to having further workshops. But we are no longer putting money aside for those purposes, but instead planning for these expenditures out of a combination of live revenues, if you will, reserves, and probably at some point some future borrowing. We do not have any need for either a rate increase or a borrowing to support this year's budget, however.
Yeah, I just, that's the fear. So how much is in reserves with regard to pay that kind of stuff?
We are forecasting at the end of the current fiscal year that the sewer division will have approximately $3.8 million in cash above minimum. In the water division, we are forecasting approximately $1.9 million cash above minimum.
And the minimum level in each case, Bill? Is
Minimum level in each case is approximately $6 million for each division.
And the $6 million includes emergency, contingency, a number of days of working capital, and a number of other components. So you've heard us talk about that on the electric division. We have similarly established that as a calculated number at any given time for water and sewer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the sewer division? Thank you, gentlemen.
Excuse me, I did want to revisit one item that Councilor Fishbein asked about. In the water division, the 673 account, there was another program that I did not mention with respect to the increase in that line item, and that was a valve maintenance program that the division is anticipating reinvigorating, shall I say, over the next fiscal year. It has been a little dormant over the last couple of years, and that is another component of that 673 account that increased that line item.
What is that program?
We have we have a valve truck and a crew that would go around to each valve, identified through the system, and they would actually try and work the valve, open and shut the valve. They would determine at that point whether the valve needed to be repaired, whether the valve was in operating condition, and if not, we would have to go out there and repair. So
it's
we
preventive maintenance.
Yeah, yes. Pretty much, yes. Last thing you want to have to do when you have a major problem is to keep backing up to various valves and shutting off more people because of a main break or that kind of problem.
All right, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good evening. Our last item on the agenda tonight is the mayor's office. Page 15 in your budget books. Mayor, are you still here?
I just had one.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mayor. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for coming.
The line 56712 negotiations, what is that?
That is our payment for, I believe, the mediators for contract negotiations. We are expecting to have three or four units coming in this year, so the request was for money to cover the hiring of mediators. I don't think that's arbitrators. I think it is mediators. It may involve arbitrators, but I believe it's mediators.
And I would expect that's just the general government side.
Yes.
And why is it in your budget and not personnel?
Because the chief negotiator by law is the mayor. So it's always shown up in the mayor's office. Actually, you could also say it could be in the law department office, but I think that's why it's there. By law, the mayor is the chief negotiator, and I delegate to others.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the mayor's office? There being none and no other business on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the meeting adjourned.